So this is my first ever video interview with an international World Cup star. So I know it's supposed to be about property, and we will go into property, but Richard Thorpe is one of the stars in the Canadian team, the recent Rugby World Cup 2015. So that was in the UK, that particular tournament. So Richard, really delighted. I've managed to interview a Guinness Book record, but I've never been with a World Cup star on video before.
Great.
So huge thanks for you spending some time with me this morning, or this afternoon it is now. So Richard, you're one of the key people to be connected to in Southwest London, because you're the National Landlords Association, or abbreviated as NLA representative. So your journey has involved both being a professional sports star and also involved in the property sector as well. Time management must be really key for you in that, because being away, playing overseas at times and so forth. You played for, I think, London Irish among other teams. So how did you manage your time? You must have some really creative strategies about managing that time.
Well, I got into property 10 years ago, so at the age of 21, and this is back in 2006, you could borrow 100% from the bank. That's what banks were doing at the time. So I went out and bought a property. Didn't need any of my own money. I needed to pay for the legal costs, but that was it. It was, I think, about $6,000, and I was on the housing ladder at the age of 21. Really interestingly, back then, you could also self-certify how much you earn. They didn't actually check your contracts. So yeah, at the age of 21, I was able to get on. I just fell into property. It was never really on my radar as something that I wanted to do long term. But I was able to rent that property out, get some passive income coming back in, and I thought, hang on a minute, this is a good little business model. So I was playing professional rugby at the time. I was at a club called London Irish that you just mentioned. So during the course of my rugby career, I retired at the end of last season. I'm 31 now. So I've just hung up my boots from full-time pro rugby. Throughout my rugby career, I've just built a property portfolio, a buy-to-let portfolio. That led me into the National Landlords Association, and I'm now the Southwest London rep for the NLA. So I run some meetings, I interact with local authorities, build relationships, and support our members and other landlords around Southwest London. But my real property journey really started to accelerate about 2 years ago. My older brother ran a family business together with my father and my mother. I was always too busy playing rugby, I didn't get involved in it, but that was in consumer finance. And Daryl, my brother, exited that business a few years back, started some subsequent businesses, was a business angel for a period of time. And we came together 2 years ago and said, let's go and become property developers. I was able to refinance my portfolio, pull some cash out, and we just went and bought a place out of auction. That was on Homes Under the Hammer, actually, that one. Okay. A couple of years back, which was good fun. And a bit of flirting with Lucy Alexander on Homes Under the Hammer, which was a good laugh. And we've kind of just evolved since then. So we started out as property developers, and that's what we thought we would do. But with Daryl's experience and expertise in finance, he was quite highly regarded within the finance industry. We thought, well, actually, we might as well try and leverage his experience there and go down the finance route. And that's ultimately where we sit now. So RDT, my company, we're a property investment fund. We deploy capital into our own developments, but predominantly we deploy capital into other developers' deals. Our own developments happen to just be one of the panel of developers that we work with.
And so, you're both looking at people who are, in terms of developers, both build to sell and build to let?
Yeah, strategy isn't an issue really. It's just deal specific. So when we're looking at someone who we will deploy some capital with, we'll look at two things. We'll look at the strength of their deal, whatever it is, whatever strategy they're trying to incorporate. We want to know what the strength of that deal is. And then secondly, it's the strength of that person. What's their track record? What's their experience like? Have they done this sort of thing before? Are they backable? And if those two things come together, they've got a good deal and they're backable as a person, we'll invest. Now we specialise in an area called mezzanine finance. I don't know if you've come across that term, but essentially your typical developer or your typical property investor will go and raise some money from the bank. That's called senior debt, and that sits at the top. It's called senior because if things go wrong, they take your house off you. They're senior to everything else. So that's your mortgage, that's your development finance, that's the senior debt. Most usual developers will then bring in equity, which is their own money or money they've raised from friends and family or investors, private investors. That's usually the two pieces that come together to get a property deal working. Well, we look to work with developers who are more ambitious than limiting themselves to their own pool of capital. We look for developers that are trying to scale up and they run out of their own money. They run out of access of private capital. So we'll come in with additional mezzanine finance. And that's a layer that sits in between the senior debt and the equity. So we will take what's called a second charge or even a third charge, depending on whether there's any bridging finance in there. I'm not going to go into too much depth because I know it gets complicated, but essentially we can come in with the mezzanine finance. If that's not suitable, we can then come in on an equity basis, in which case joint venturing. So we look for developers that we can joint venture with or lend to on fixed returns, and that's what we do. We just happen to do our own developments as well, and we're one of the developers that we'll invest into, if that makes sense.
Going back to your rugby experience, where have you brought your professionalism of sport into your property investing?
Good question. So rugby is obviously a finite career. You can only play it for so long. I mean, the average retirement age used to be 35. It's now about 32 for rugby players. And you earn very well while you're playing, but typically when you retire, your pay falls off a cliff. So I've always been very conscious of that. And I wanted to have a smooth transition and hopefully accelerate my own personal wealth. So property has been what I've chosen to be interested in. So throughout my career, I've tried to leverage myself as a rugby player as best I can to help build my network and leverage the money that I've been able to earn playing rugby as well into property. So that's the real benefit, I guess. Now, it seems to be something that people are interested to talk about, to kind of call a spade a spade. Typically people are, oh, you used to play rugby? Great, let's have a chat. And it just kind of gets you in the room with people. So I've been able to have some high-level conversations with some pretty influential people in the property sector now because they're interested in rugby. And bringing sport and business together is something that a lot of people do. There are a lot of sports business networks out there now, which we're starting to explore.
Including the Rugby Business Network.
The Rugby Business Network would be exactly the one I'm referring to. So so that's it. There's a natural merge there between sport and business because most business people are keen and interested in sport. Not most, but a lot of them are.
And also getting out of the comfort zone as well.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, most sportsmen are interested in business because at some point they're not going to be able to play sport anymore. So they sit quite neatly hand in hand. So that's what I'm now trying to leverage as much as I can, my rugby connections. So I'm now delivering property investment seminars to all the Premiership rugby clubs. For example, I did Saracens last week, which was great, when it just presented very sort of low-level, entry-level property investment strategies, etc., to them, with a view of finding the guys that are really interested and they can come on a one day with us.
Sure.
And this is all free. This is just I want to be able to help rugby players get into property if that's something they want to do. So it's not a profit exercise for us. There may be something just to kind of cover our costs, but that's going to be it. And then we'll kind of just see where that goes. So that's really exciting. It kind of keeps my toe in the door in the rugby world because it's something I'm struggling letting go of, and I'm able to leverage what I'm doing in rugby alongside it.
Well, in terms of, looking at property software, do you use any software to manage your portfolio?
In terms of software, no. Now, I was a hands-on landlord for about 7 or 8 years, managed the tenancies myself, didn't use agents, went out, sourced the tenants myself. My niche in West London has been housing benefit tenants, local authority tenants, so I'd organise that structure as well. But I just found it so time intensive, and when you start to value your time more, as I do now, That just needs to get outsourced. So I now just use a normal high street agent to do that, because I like to be able to pick up the phone and deal with someone directly. So in terms of software that I use, we use a virtual assistant. Brilliant. I've been using a virtual assistant now for about 4 months, and it's completely revolutionised my life. We were having this conversation earlier on about it, and I basically just sacrificed control of my diary to my assistant, and she's able to just manage anything. So whenever I get a call for a meeting, I'm able to just forward it straight to the PA, the VA, and she can find time in my diary. So I can kind of offload that thought. Don't need to consider it. So at the start of every week, I can just go through my diary. So I guess you can call that being tech. But I'll pull up my iPhone, go into my iCal, and I know what I've got structured. I can just see it there. But someone else has found the venue, sorted out the time and everything else, and found the time in my diary. So it's no longer my responsibility. And that's a great weight to lift off yourself.
Do you use a CRM system?
No, we don't.
No. So to track it, it's all done on Excel and.
Yes, so we run off Excel spreadsheets.
Okay. And going forward, looking at your best investment for below £100, what would that be?
One of Brendan Quinn's meetings. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I think, genuinely speaking, whether it's one of your meetings or any of the others, I've had so much value from attending networking nights. You tend to find that 80%, 90% of the room might not necessarily be a good fit with you, but remember, you only need one joint venture relationship. You only need to meet one person who puts you in contact with the right person to suddenly do very well for yourself. So it's worth spending the time. Go to the networking nights. It may seem like it's slow burn, you're not getting anywhere, but I can certainly speak from my own personal experience. Getting out, meeting people is the name of the game. This is a relationship business.
Where's your success come through networking? Is it a follow-up strategy which you really...
Yeah, so my original strategy was whoever I get a business card of and I want to connect with them, I connected with them immediately, i.e. that night I'll send them an email. Great to meet you, would love to get together and chew the fat in more depth. Should we go have a coffee? That was my initial strategy. I'm now finding that my diary is so full that I can't afford to do that all the time. There's so many people that I want to meet up with, but I just need to try and find the time to be able to do it.
Okay, so follow-up strategy is important. Is social media important as well in that?
Yeah, so we
mostly. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, so social media is something that has been on our radar for about a year now. I've kind of flirted with it, put out a little bit of content. I know you do a lot of content, like this video, for example, and I see a lot of value to that. So we actually have we've got a meeting with a social media expert next week, who's going to develop our strategy going forward, and just see what's going to be the best for RDT, because we ultimately look for investors, because we raise capital and pay fixed interest to investors, and we look for developers in order to place capital into. So what's the best strategy for us from a social media perspective to service those two needs of ours? Sure. So yeah, that's something that we'll be rolling out in the next couple of months.
So I'm sure you're definitely going to hear more about Richard, partly because NLA representative. I've got to confirm the time that Richard will be speaking at one of my events. Richard's already been on a panel earlier this year. Now, Richard, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it through Facebook, LinkedIn, email, website?
At the moment, it would be our website. So that's rdtinvest.co.uk, Romeo Delta Tango invest.co.uk. Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I've got one of those blue tick pages if you want to connect with me on Facebook. I've got a normal social page as well, which you're free to add me on and connect with me that way. My email address is richard.thorpe@rdtinvest.co.uk. If people want to send me an email, that's Romeo Delta Tango Invest. Yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat.
And you've got your own NLA events coming up in southwest London. Is there a particular time they take place? Or?
Yeah, so the best way to find out my meetings is to go on the NLA website, which is landlords.org.uk. There's a little button there called In My Area. Scroll down to Greater London, and then you'll see my meetings under there. So I've got NLA Wandsworth coming up, NLA Sutton, I'll have NLA Kingston in the new year. I've just had Croydon and Richmond, so sorry if those were convenient for you, but you've missed those. But I'll be running those again in about 6 months' time. So I try and run a meeting a month in one of 7 boroughs around southwest London. So
I could easily go on, and I would say the best way, personally, is to come along to my meet when Richard will be speaking. I would definitely share that on YouTube or Facebook or all the other social media platforms which I use. Really do thank you for listening. I really thank Richard as well for taking part in this interview.
Pleasure. Brendan, for you, anytime.
Thank you, and thank you.